Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am Aggelos, the founder of Dungeon Crawler Network and From the Ashes, and I'm here for a very special episode, something that I've really been excited about since I've been planning this one for a couple of weeks now. It's another Phoenix Roundtable, which is where we get to meet other people who are not under the DCN umbrella and from the wider Ashes of Creation community who get together because I lasso them in and I don't let them go and I make them talk about stuff. Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, and I don't even plan on playing a tank, but I use the lasso ability anyway. Don't tell Intrepid, I hacked it. It's cool. All right, so first off, I got to introduce... You may know her from around the official Discord and forums. Maybe. Hopefully in a good way and she hasn't banned you. But she is the newest community moderator over at Ashes of Creation Intrepid Studios. That would be Belewyn. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. I know when you first got, promoted up to community manager, I'm like, oh, she's new. A lot of the other people have been around for a very long time. And I'm like, this would be a great opportunity to introduce you to our community as a whole, in whatever way. And you would be able to, get to know you as a person, not just the banhammer, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Unless you really like the banhammer, in which case, feel free to be pictured with it.
I haven't used it yet.
Ooh, fun. After this episode, maybe I'll be the one getting the banhammer. Who knows? Next up, that face you see, that would be Sinbad, one of the leaders of the Seven Kingdoms and Ashes of Creation exclusive guild. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, I'm really glad you sent me a message at one point going, hey, I want to come on your show. I'm like, you volunteered, you asked for it, it's happening. Yep. Woe unto you.
I had to get in here because I saw your show. I've been watching it for a long time. Loved it. So wanted to come in here, talk about Ashes Creation, talk about my guild at one point. So glad to be here. Excellent.
The other awesome guy you see all the way down there at the bottom if you see the video, just because that's where he ended up because he was the last one to join the call. That would be Telchar, Guildmaster of the Sons of the Seven, another PvX guild for Ashes of Creation. How are you, sir?
Doing fine. How about yourself?
Doing great. Glad you could show up.
I'm glad I'm here too. I've been waiting to come on the show for a while, and it seems like a good time to join.
Absolutely. I know I've been courting quite a few people. I know there's a ton of people who I've been messaging, because obviously if you're just coming into this show is a podcast that's segmented into various smaller segments that kind of deal with one thing or another. We have our Ashen News, which is our weekly news recap. We have our Pillars of Creation, which is a more of a Good Morning American style show with Thais and myself, where we sit down and dissect news and anything like that. And then we have the Phoenix Roundtable. This is where we get people from outside the community to come in and talk about awesome stuff. Now, you may notice a theme here. For, a lot of it, we're going to be talking about guilds today, right? So that's what we're theory crafting. So I got a lot of guild leaders to come on. But before we do that, I wanted to give Belewyn a little bit of time to introduce herself and kind of tell all of us who you are as a person.
All right. Thank you so much. So yeah, I am one of the newer people to join the community, as well as joining the community moderator team. Most recently, I was working in the Archage chapter with a guild that some of you guys have heard of, the White Order. Having moved on from the Archage chapter, I decided to look at Ashes of Creation. Heard a lot about it while I was still playing the game. Seemed like it had a lot of promise, so I came over here with some really high expectations. And as a former community manager and administrator, I decided to apply those skills when I heard that there was an opening for the moderator position. I got to meet with the Intrepid Studios team and reviewed some of the background and some of the work which I had done previously with Lord of the Rings Online as a moderator, and also with Armor 3 as an administrator and moderator, and was gladly welcomed onto the team and introduced about a little over a week ago to the community for the first time.
Absolutely, yeah. That was. I like that you brought in that you played a lot of Arcade, because it's actually one of the things that attracted me most to Ashes of Creation is the fact that so much of it feels very reminiscent of Arcade. Now, we talked pre-show. I am not fond of Korean imports. Most Asian MMOs in general, and that's a personal thing for me. I just don't like the aesthetic. So the idea of a game being developed by a Western studio that kind of took a lot of the ideas from Arcade had me excited. Because on concept, on paper, Arcade had a lot of awesome things. I was like, wow, that seems like really cool things to interact with, right? And, you know, I mean, obviously we had the ships thing, which really had me hooked because, you know, Ultima Online was my first MMO, and I think my first house was a houseboat, and it was amazing until it got raided by pirates.
Outstanding.
I'm still hurt by that, actually. You know, like 19 years later, it still hurts my heart that my boat got stolen by pirates.
Those important memories.
Yeah, it's been fueling the hate for generations. My son will also feel the hate going forward against pirates. But all right. So thank you so much for coming on. We really do appreciate it. And I think we'll have a lot of fun today talking about guilds. All right, guys. Let's go ahead and just jump right on into it. Guilds are the topic of the day. It's going to be theory crafting of what we are thinking guilds are going to be like within Ashes of Creation, what our hopes are, what our dreams are, and hopefully what our nightmares hopefully never come to pass are. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. We're going to talk about guild management tools. What is the bare minimum requirements that we feel like we would need for guild management? So I'm going to go ahead and just go down the line. If you want to just give like what you would think is a bare minimum requirement to manage your guild from like an HR perspective. Belewyn.
Well, when I look at the guild management, and one of the tools that really strikes me as a need, besides your basic rank structure that's going to delineate, let's say, an officer, a junior officer, a veteran member, it's something that's going to allow you to delineate perms at each level. What can each person do within the guild? Can they modify things such as taxes or apply guild loot from, let's say, the guild bank or items like that, in addition to, obviously, a bunch of promised robust sets of items that we could potentially explore later in the show.
Okay. Sinbad, what about you?
Well, another thing would be able to find out where your members are. You know, that's a huge, important function to us, is being able to actually toggle on the ability to see where their location is on the map. With how heavy this game is on guild versus guild wars and guild versus guild alliances, you need to know where your people are. And if you don't have that option, it's going to be very hard to coordinate.
All right, so I'm going to bring in a little bit of like my not guild history, my MMO history. Does anyone remember the Guild Wars 2 extended experience app that they were talking about one time, long time ago in a land far, far away? An app that would allow you to see your guild members from a tablet.
Yes.
Yep.
How disappointed we were when that never actually came to pass. Man. I mean, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that. And, I mean, this might be kind of far-fetched, because here's the thing. Everything with Intrepid is they are, in essence, now obviously with how well their crowdfunding went with being like the number one MMO that's ever been crowdfunded. I mean, they technically beat out Star Citizen in terms of the amount of money brought in during Kickstarter. It's just Star Citizen did amazing after that point. But they're still an indie studio at heart, right? I would love to see an extended experience app for that kind of thing as well. Just bringing that in since you brought it in full circle at this point. But do you guys think that would be something that they could do on a shoestring budget, more or less? Or is that just hopes and dreams? And
You know, honestly, as far as an out of game app, I don't think they would have the ability to do that with their budget. But I think within game, it's not that hard to just toggle a code that basically says show on the overall map layout where your individual members are. Because that basically they should have an identifying marker in their code just saying, you know, this person is part of this guild, right? So it should be something simple. It's just a simple couple lines. I'm not a programmer myself, so I don't know how complicated it is. But from my very basic knowledge, that shouldn't be too difficult.
And I agree with you, actually, because you're looking at things that are not net new. And a lot of the team from Intrepid Studios are gamers themselves. They've already seen these experienced in other games. So it's not like they're reinventing the wheel here. They're just more of a new spin on it.
Absolutely. I mean, Steven called me out on some of our interview questions when I interviewed him before, when I was like, so what if I tried to, like, manipulate this? He's like, oh, no, I wouldn't let people, essentially hacks that thing. Like, well, that was the first thing I jumped on. He's like, I know, I would have jumped on it too, so therefore, no, we're not going to allow that. Telchar, how about you? What are your bare minimum requirements for a guild management to monitor and to manage your guild from the human resource perspective?
So one of the big things that I've been waiting for more info on, and it kind of ties into the last topic about the map thing, is, this game could be potentially huge, like in terms of the overall surface area of the map. And, if it's something as, we'll kind of already jump into the other game example, if it's something as expansive as, like, let's say EVE Online, and with the thousands and thousands of systems out there representing the nodes in this game, it could be very chaotic to try to manage a lot of people. So I would like to have the ability to have a toggleable, you could say, resolution for looking at members. Like, I could set my own rules on how detailed I want the map to show up. Some people that may only have 50 or 60 people don't need it to be that detailed because they're all in the same area. But if you have 1,000 people in your guild or something like that, or the alliance, for example, and you need to look and drill down on that to help coordinate anything, you need to be able to have a pretty in-depth system for that. I don't think it's a requirement for me, like, immediately, but in order to have a successful, like, alliance function, we got to have a logistics system that's pretty detailed, especially when we're trying to defend our land from the invaders. So it's a definite concern for me on that side. I think Steven understands what is needed. I'm curious to see how they will be able to deliver it in the time frame that they have set aside to build the game. So
absolutely. And I'm going to bring up some stuff for me, like for my bare minimum requirements. And these guys, I love that they went kind of like the full fantasy thing here. And I say full fantasy as in your hopes and dreams, because that's what I ask for, right? But from the games that I have played, I'm going to be the more like, it should be more common sense answers. But it's actually, you'd be surprised the amount of things in recent games that I have played where we would have thought would have been common sense, but were not. For bare minimum for guild management, I know Belewyn kind of touched on it a little bit, but for the longest time, and my most recent game, for anyone who doesn't know, we do another show on the Elder Scrolls Online. We've done it now for 3 years. We're like, this week is our 150th episode, so we're pretty far along in that one. But for the longest time, there were no permissions on Guildbank. You either had it or you didn't, And that is, how stressful that was, especially as a leader who's trying to hold materials, make sure we have stuff for people. And it was the amount of management time on my part to have to babysit the bank because someone would go, hey, can I get that recipe out of there? Well, absolutely. We were an open guild. We were open community. We wanted to help people. But at the same time, you couldn't let the bank be open to everyone because we've had issues with people who, they came in, they grabbed everything they could, and they left. It's human nature. You have to be a little protective. But you would have thought that guild banks would have had guild permissions, that you could assign this. But it was literally, the only differentiating opinion here was whether or not you could take gold out or not. That was one. Or you could take items out or not. That was another. There was no limiting the amount of items per stack or per a certain number of withdrawals or anything like that you would think would be helpful, because you could at least, by doing that, limit and say new players can only withdraw one item a day, right? You would start seeing, when you start looking at the logs, going, hey, I see that, Sinbad in our guild here has been taking a, legendary material out every single day for the past month. He can't possibly be needing all of that. He's clearly a ninja. Sorry, I had to pick on you there for a bit. I'll be picking on people throughout the show. I'll just randomly use you as an example at some point, so be prepared. And, you know, like those kinds of things are something that other games surprisingly have not had. With that tying in, this is more something along my hopes and dreams. A lot of guilds have those logs, right? They have guild logs. These are the people that have been invited. These are the people that have left. These are the guild taxes, if you have guild taxes. The only game I think I've ever played that had guild taxes was Dark Age of Camelot, so you could see the amount of money coming into your guild bank. And then, like, access to and from the guild bank, who deposited what, who didn't. The issue that I've always had with those is there's a limit. They only show 200 items or whatever the case may be. Is I would love to have some sort of really robust web API available that I could pull that information and I could store the archive. I don't care if they only stop at 200 characters to save server space. That's fine. But allowing me to have access to the web API so that way I can pull it into my database and monitor would be insanely helpful. That is something for me, again, having to have managed this guild bank monstrosity that the Elder Scrolls Online had early on. It really made me go, man, it'd be just so helpful to have these tools, right? So
I think they actually mentioned in one of the questions and answering sessions that they had the ability to do something similar to that. Not necessarily with like the guild permissions, but with another functionality in the game. So I think that wouldn't be a stretch that they should be able to just give you that spreadsheet. Even just being able to pull it from the server. It shouldn't be too hard. And to kind of touch on something Belewyn also said along with the Guild Vault's permissions, what if you had the option of just giving that person the option to just pull out an individual item or an individual amount of items versus entire storage units? Because that to me is it's too macro. You have to basically be able to shrink it down to one or two things that person has access to. That way you don't have the option of losing out on a ton of stuff that they decide to just take everything and run.
I like that. So if anyone has anything else they want to say, they can just jump in here. But, when you mention that micro, my officers and I for our guild, we're working on something for our guild website to help track and all this stuff. And I remember we were working on a database, and I said to one of my co-leaders here, saying, "Hey, this is what I want, but don't feel like you're going to be obligated to go too crazy. Like, it doesn't have to be super foolproof. You can just leave a type-in box and let people type in the number." He's like, "No, I'd rather spend the extra time, go super granular, and force what people can put on, because then I don't have to deal with the issue later on." And that really struck home with me because, some people may not deal with it on such a micro level, but you may only have to set that up one time, right? Mm-hmm. So, you're right. For the next 20, 30 hours, that's all I'm doing when I hop in and do guild management. But then I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Exactly.
But you're going to find players that really like that aspect of the game too, the micromanagement, and having those tools is vital. The last game that I played, Arcade, for example, literally no permissions were delineated out at that level. You had a house, and you could put chests in it, and you could set the chest to either family or guild. That's so much of a dissatisfier. There's really no level of management involved there, and absolutely, as you had alluded, the API, nothing close to that existed. So that was a common problem for us in our guild was people would get access and walk away and clean out the entire bank with no logs.
Absolutely. Yep. And just because, and it's great that Sinbad and Telchar are here as well. You guys, I don't know the sizes of your guild, but I'm assuming they're fairly meaty in size. With that being said, do you trust every single person within your guild to have that full access? I mean, I can say I don't within our guild. I mean, we have amazing people in our guild, but at the same time, I'm not going to let the temptation of having a super rare item sitting in a bank that anyone can grab and just hope that someone doesn't listen to the devil on their shoulder.
I would like to see, I think that this is something that they kind of alluded to, is a lot of it's going to be relatively automated with the kind of things you can do. You could, let's say, there's a guild talent tree or something. You could spend the talent point to unlock like a guild shop manager or a quartermaster, for example, and you could write the scripts effectively. Like if you want to basically have the members pay the cost that the guild has acquired the item for to withdraw that thing from the guild, the bank or whatever. It all be internalized within some permission level, officer and higher, for example. I would like to see that all be done either through some kind of spreadsheet online as well as in game, because having to tab in and out and do all these kind of things that would take a lot of time to import in, and then whatever language they use to let you describe. If it's just a checkbox like this member can do that, that's possibly not detailed enough. Some mercantilism or economic type focus guilds are trying to set up like supply chains, for example. It's a pain in the ass to have to deal with, dispersing the assets to the members that are then going to then sell that stuff to their own little area of influence that they're working in. Better off to automate it internally and let us control it to fine detail within the system. So,
yeah, absolutely. Because I know within the Elder Scrolls Online, again, I pull this game up because it's my most recent, there were entire guilds that were literally only focused on selling because there was no global auction house in that game. It was all blind bid for market stalls, right? So you would have entire guilds, these huge, massive guilds, massive for what it was. Some had multiple offshoots, but there was a 500-person cap. But they'd be full. They'd have waiting lines because what they would do is that their entire purpose was only to do raffles to earn money and sell at these spots to make sure you had. So the people who were added to this guild were not necessarily trustworthy. They just met the bare minimum requirement of they moved X amount of money through the guild trader, and that's why they were allowed to stay. So you need that level of micromanagement for those particular cases, right?
Another kind of thing to remember is that their caravan system is relatively intricate already in terms of like initializing that, what goes on it, level of detail of the guards, when it's going, if we are going to have control of that. So if guilds have the ability to set minimum permissions for who can initiate a transfer from warehouse A to warehouse B with the caravan system, how's that going to be done? It's going to have to be very deep because someone finds a small little loophole in it and initiates some kind of bug transfer, and there goes the whole stockpile of gold. Like it's got to be very robust and tested thoroughly because there's a lot of holes that can happen in scripts just by the nature of the way they exist. So.
And remember how I said pre-show we'll have these little offshoots? You brought up something I didn't even think about because I know during one of the live streams they talked about how the caravan system is not going to be like Guild Wars 2 where there's Doliacs running every 10 minutes. It was something that you were supposed to initiate from an NPC, like a quest NPC, to it in order to put it out. I didn't even think about it on the guild level of someone going, all right, I'm going to release a caravan full of the guild's resources, and then I'm just not going to tell anybody, and I'll let bandits take it, right? Especially if there's that espionage level within the guild of, we've all heard the story of EVE Online with the guy who spent like 3 years of his life infiltrating another guild to get up into the ranks and then pretty much stole everything they had. I love that story. It's one of the best stories of emergent gameplay.
That can happen in any organization, even with the level of detail of control that EVE had. They have a relatively deep control system to allow you to access this container and et cetera, for guilds. But that's the guy spent the time to make his way up the organization and reach that permission level. So it's not a fault of the permission level. It's just a fault of them letting a mole come in. So you got to remember that even a extremely tight security can still get broken if they allow the sneaks.
And that, to me, that was actually one of the things we were focusing on as a guild is like espionage. Like that's a huge factor for how you start a guild, even this early for Ashes of Creation, because people can get in at this base level with an alt account, and then they've been there forever, so you trust them. Yeah. One thing I was thinking about with the permissions for the guild bank and the guild vault was expiring permissions. You could set a permission to expire after so much time. And that could basically alleviate, like let's say you have, your guild just ran a couple raids and you want to reward some players. You can say, okay, you guys have access to this vault for this amount of time, and then it will just go on its own and you don't have to worry about it.
I was muted there for a second. No, and actually that level of detail is something that was helpful, would have been helpful in other games too, especially if it's along the lines of you're out doing something. I mean, there's not a lot of there's not going to be hardly any fast travel in this game. So you have someone in your guild going, hey, I need X item, I don't have permission, but you want to give it to him anyway. Being able to set expiring permissions, go ahead and grab it out of the guild bank, and I don't have to remember that after I was done, I granted someone permissions to do stuff,
Mm-hmm.
That alone, it would be really helpful. Because I've done that in the past where it's like, I'd have people ask me for stuff, and I'm like, I'm in the middle of a raid here, guys. Here you go. You're promoted for a minute. Grab what you want, let me know when you're done, and then I promote them back down. But I would then have to remember to do that. So expiring permissions, that is something that's interesting. And it also brings in the idea of they have to continually show their loyalty in order for those permissions to renew. I mean, on a very, I guess, I don't want to say not granular level, but on a more technical level, even like Windows passwords, for instance, and because I'm a system administrator, just something simple, we have expiring passwords on people's accounts that after a certain period for security, and as well as, to make sure they're actually logging in. If someone doesn't log in for X amount of time, it disables their account for security reasons. Being able to have an expiring permission that's like, Telchar, you're in the guild, we'll give you permission, but then if you start fading off or whatever the case may be, is you lose that permission, and then you're like, I don't know, you could have sold your account for all we know, gave it to someone else.
One of the things that Black Desert Online did really well with that, they had a contract that went out. So if you were a member of the guild, you received a contract for XYZ amount of time. It also came with a stipend. So it was a set expiration period, and if your activity didn't reflect so much in the guild points, then they knew that they had to trim back your contract value. Leading up to eventually you could cut membership and not renew the contract at all, and they would be dismissed from the guild.
Could you explain that system a little bit more for me? Because that's really fascinating that you mentioned that. Like, how did all that, like, there was a guild, like, participation value, essentially, you were saying?
Yeah, it's like a contribution points that were accumulated for doing questing and completing deeds inside of the guild quest. So it essentially tracked your activity, and it was one of the items that you could look into the perms and the guild window, like in the GUI itself, and see your members and where their activity levels were. So when you were doing the contracts as a guild manager, you were able to adjust the value accordingly, and you could extend the lengths as well. So there were multiple options for the length of the contracts.
That's actually really fascinating. I didn't play much Black Desert. I didn't even know that was a thing that was available. We're going to have to circle back to that one when we get down to one of our one of our later bullet points, because that system is really, really fascinating. I'm glad that you brought that up. So we'll move on with what we were working on here. So we talk about bare minimums for the guild. Now, what level of accessibility of a guild needs to be brought out of the game? Like, how much do we actually need to see? Now, I said about bringing the web API out to manage guild logs, because obviously if you make those logs available, put the onus on the player to worry about storage space, because I know I deal with server logs all day. I know they grow exponentially, and it's just easier to drop them off after a period of time. But if a guild needs that level of retention, let it be on them. Let the onus be on them to set up their own servers. Intrepid doesn't have to worry about that. They shouldn't have to worry about that. That's not what they need to do. But giving the ability for us to pull those and store the logs ourselves would be insanely useful, at least from my point of view. So let's go ahead and we're going to go from the bottom up here. Telchar, what about you? What kind of accessibility does a guild need to have out of game, or doesn't need anything like that?
To kind of just jump off what you were talking about, they can even somewhat cover their costs by having a guild functional purchases. Like if you want to have a storage that's supplied by them, you could say I'll pay $10 a month or something to keep the logs on a cloud somewhere. That's something that they can monetize, and if they really wanted to do that, they can also have a minimum. Like you can say, we'll keep the logs for 7 days, and then the oldest one rotates out. You need to export it yourself, or you lose it. There's a bunch of different ways that they could do that. What I need them to do is, if they do have some kind of log system, is allow us to automate that. it has a webhook tie-in to allow us to export a CSV file or something like that, I need to be able to send that to the tools that I have on the side and have them be able to read those logs automatically. There's a lot of economy stuff that can be gleaned from that kind of automatic information like that. So that's what I need to see personally. If it's not there, you can always do the brute force labor effort for it, but that's something that this heavily economy-based game needs to have to be done very, we could call it best practice or whatever you want to call it. So.
Absolutely. Sinbad, what about you, sir?
For me, it'd be being able to kick members or recruit members outside of the game. Like, let's say if you're at work and you have like the app on your phone, you should be able to accept a guild member right into your guild if you need to. Or if a guild member is causing a lot of drama, they're stealing stuff from the guild vault, for example, or doing something that's destroying the guild, you should be able to remove them from your guild at a press of a button. It shouldn't be something that you're restricted to as far as having to log in, because you may not be on to be able to do that. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I've been in our community Discord, I've had multiple people come on going, "Hey, is anyone online right now, to invite me to your ESO guild?" I'm like, "I'm in the middle of work." So absolutely, here, let me log on. No. I can stop doing what I'm doing right now and, darn the consequences of whether or not this server ever comes back up, and I'll go ahead and invite you. But yeah, no, that would be really, really, useful. Here's another tidbit for you. We had heard about the because, Intrepid and Discord are partners, right? We have that partnership there. What do you think about there being a functionality within Discord itself to be able to, when it's integrated into the game, being able to kick someone from your Discord guild server also does it from within the game itself?
That'd be awesome. You'd have to make sure your permissions are set up correctly, but if you do that right, you wouldn't have to worry about it.
Yeah. It was just something I thought about because I'm like, well, they're planning on integrating Discord within the guild itself. Now, the issue I could see with that is depending on how it's integrated, which we don't know yet, would be like if I brought my community, the Dungeon Crawl Network community in, we cover a vast range of games. I shouldn't say vast, it's like 5 or 6. But bringing that into Ashes of Creation, not everyone that's in that Discord would also be playing. A high number probably will be, but not everybody. Would we be required at that point to create a sub-server that's tied to our Ashes of Creation account or guild account? Now, it's just an interesting thought that I would have had on that case. But yeah, I was just thinking if Discord would be able to have those permissions, and if they are partners, why not have a bot that works? Like you could have a Discord bot in your guild that you could order through Discord. Like you could just send a command through a Discord bot, and the bot would then work within the game itself, transfers it to a character in your guild, and does the remove.
And I agree with you there, because I think that with the capabilities we currently have with the bots, it could be as simple as inviting the bot to your server, custom tailoring it to be able to offer you the perm levels or the subscription basis that you wanted from it, and then just assigning a blanket role to that bot. And then you wouldn't have to build out a sub-server, logically thinking.
Yeah, no, that and the bot, like I said, if it tied to a quote-unquote Discord bot that came with every guild, that would be able to read those API commands, you would be set through Discord, which you can already get on your phone or, any device that you really have at this point. I think that'd be a fun idea. I know it's kind of out there, but I mean, if the web API is there and they're already a partner with Discord, maybe that's something that would be neat to bring into play. Belewyn, what about you? What are the accessibility needs for being brought in or out of the game?
So really, you guys had already touched on the API, or the ability to export database logs, and I think that for me is also the real important thing, because as a former guild manager, you would be able to then take items such as the guild member's roster. Let's look at what gear does each member have. You could potentially database that out and export it into, let's say, a crystal report or a PDF report that could then be presented to your leadership to look at, okay, let's look where our weakness is. What is our averages looking like on the gear chart? Who has what? Where do we need to grow? And how can we strategize within the guild?
You brought some nightmares to me when you said crystal reports, because I've written so many crystal reports for people over the years.
I'm sorry.
I had heart palpitations there for a second. Like, oh no, not another crystal report, please, God, no. No, it actually is a very useful tool, but no.
Very much so.
Yeah. That's my day job, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to write another darn report.
So, touching back on one of my experiences, so with Lord of the Rings, they built a web-based URL that you can navigate to, and what it did is it actually pulled the data of the characters. Now, the downfall to it is that it really wasn't in an exportable or usable format for databasing. It was more of a picture that you could hover over and obtain information. So the scripting capabilities of that were so weak, but the groundwork was laid. They built that web interface that uploaded the character data sheets. So it was a starting point, and I think that they could really benefit from building on that type of a concept.
Yeah, no, I can see what you mean. That's useful for a website to be able to pull up, but you're not going to be able to get any analytical data to find out gear, especially if your guild uses something like DKP or something along those lines to figure out gearing and whatnot for people. I agree that that's nice in theory, but needing to have some sort of archiving ability is more than just a hyperlink, if you will.
Yeah.
All right.
I think
living in the cloud world. Yep. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think one of Steven's big fears about APIs and that concept in general is releasing it to the general public means that they have to give some kind of SQL code for a lot of hidden items, and there's a way that people can data mine out through the new releases. So there's a way that they can simply just give us what is current and no additional info, and that's up to the, it could have a rarity or something like that assigned to it as part of a value. But they don't have to give anything beyond what the potentials are. They can always keep that hidden, and it's only from internal and then reports what exists. It doesn't actually have to do anything like a full range of things as on an exported tool. I think that would be a good way to meet somewhere in the middle, because they're very worried about people mining out the good recipes and figuring out where to go and get the cool stuff. So.
Well, I mean, that level, like you said, that there is a real issue with that, because being able to data mine that information, like you said, there will be hidden things in the world that we may not know of. Like, for instance, node progression. Just being able to data mine out a dungeon name, for instance, or anything of that nature would be enough to go, it's not on our world map, so clearly we need to figure, and you can analytically look at where it's at and try to figure out where it's tied to. What is that string of code tied to? Well, it's tied to, this string of code, which is tied to this string, which is a node. It's got to be this node, I definitely agree with you on that. There is that possibility of being able to data mine from API codes. There's also the ability of, like you said, acquiring information that you really shouldn't have, or they don't want you to have. Having the ability to have a really robust API, depending on what you're being able to see, you could write add-ons that would allow you to do various things within the API. I don't want to say guild. I just had it auction house like messing around with, because there isn't really going to be so much of one, but those things are possible. The idea also is being able to do something along the lines of, and while I'm in favor of, I know a lot of people aren't, damage meters, being able to access API. If you don't limit certain API fields, people will be able to pull character information about people that maybe that person wanted to keep hidden, especially if it's a PvP situation. Like, if I'm able to pull Belewyn's stats, I can see how she's building her character, and therefore I know how I can hard counter her by going, okay, so she's a bard, and a bard hard counters a mage. Well, I'll just roll forward with the mage, and then she's dead, or she'll probably kill me. But that's that. Being able to get that information does provide a level of, I guess, I don't want to say unfairness, because it would be almost available to anyone if they had the knowledge to do it. It's an advantage, yes, that, maybe shouldn't be available.
There should definitely be some table limitations. So if they're going to look at what can be exported, you really have to drive the table perms to an exact and precise level. Otherwise, if you're allowing them to directly interface with the database inside of the game itself, then they're going to be able to modify fields and find ways around, as you alluded to. But if they restrict the data sets and they're exported to, let's say, a cloud server and then they're available to you, it really limits what's going to become available.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you actually said when you export it to a cloud, that would actually help prevent, like you said, a lot of the data mining that would happen, because they wouldn't be able to access files that were not normally available, because it would only be the raw data sent to an external server, and there's no way to get from where you're at when you hop into that server to make it back across to get remainder
and
files.
And that's not new. We do that currently in the medical world with like image sharing between hospitals. So there's already been real world applications of that where, let's say, protected patient information is at risk. So.
Now, but I'm glad you said that, because I work a lot. Where I work, we are bound very much by PCI related stuff, because we deal with a lot of credit cards. With that being said, being able to have that technology, that secure technology that you're referring to for that secure passage of, like you said, medical files, are being able to store PCI related stuff. That's not cheap. That is not cheap to be able to maintain and to make sure is constantly, meeting audit requirements. You think that might be a hindering factor for them? Like, maybe that's why they may want to just step away from API in general, just due to the sheer cost of being able to set something up like that and monitoring it?
I don't know. The cost of cloud servers these days is pretty small compared to what it was. So
I wouldn't say cloud server. I'm actually referring to the steps and procedures and stuff for secure transmission of what you would say private data, like that kind of stuff. Being able to maintain, for us, PCI requirements, and I guess for medical professional, I guess that's HIPAA, right? If I remember.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man, I'm so sad that I know so much about this. I've been through so many audits in my day. I'm also the audit guy.
There's actually open source software that's out there today that's even recognized by some of the professional organizations that allow you to do things such as anonymize data, etc. So it's not like there's a huge cost. I think it's achievable.
Okay, cool. I'm actually glad to hear you say that, because that's always I can tell you right now. Anytime I hear any HIPAA PC, I just was like, no. I've outright refused requests just because I'm like, no, I'll have to explain this to an auditor at some point. So no, just absolutely no. I don't want to deal with it. So no, I'm glad that you're thinking that might be more open, because that would be really fascinating to use, and having these APIs available. All right, so there we go. Now we're up to some fun stuff. All right, so I say that actually that's kind of fun, but this is even more fun. We're going to talk about guild participation tools to encourage, well, just what I said, guild participation. I'm actually going to move this field down here because I have it in my notes, but I felt like it was in the wrong spot. So that's gonna hop down here one spot. So the first question I have here is, what type of tools should be implemented to help fund a guild's progression? Right. So, and when I say guild progression, obviously we already talked about guilds in a management style from a human resource perspective. Now we want to talk about guilds on a level of, hey, we have all these people and we need to fund it. It's like almost like a small country. You need money to run, right? You need materials to run. You can have a guild of 5,000 people, but if you have no armor, you're all naked, you're not very effective. Well, maybe not at fighting, maybe other things, I don't know. But, what kind of guild tools would help fund a guild's progression? So, Belewyn, how about you start?
So one of the first things that comes to mind for me is, let's say you're out doing a raid. You're killing a boss as a guild, and the loot comes up. One of the things that's always there is, how do we handle the intake of wealth that comes into the guild? Are we directly assigning it there and then, right at the drop? Or is there a tool that could possibly be added in that would then tax the drops and pull into a communal fund, such as a guild bank? I think that could go a long way to reach that goal.
Now, when you say about the guild tax, was something that was really fascinating to me when it was first implemented, that I saw it in Dark Age of Camelot. what it did was it would apply a flat amount of tax, because this wasn't something you could control in this level. It was just a flat amount of tax that when you were part of a guild, a thing dropped 10 coins, it would add an extra 1 coin that you didn't see, but it would go into a guild bank, right?
Right.
Now, my only issue with that is an artificial inflation of economy, because it's essentially creating money out of nothing, right? Because it's like, why wouldn't you have guild taxes on if the money's not actually being taken from Sinbad or Telchar or Belewyn? It's just magic money that pops out of nothing. But having the ability to set a tax rate in your guild, right? And
Yes.
then that money, like if 100 coins drop and you take 10%, I'm only getting 90. Like I would see that there was 100 drop, but it's like you got 90, 10 goes to your guild. Is that something more along the lines of what you're looking for?
Absolutely.
What level of control do you want guilds to have on that? Because like you said, 10%, that's great. But what about if a guild needs more money? And I mean, that leads to the idea of, wow, I really, I'm with these group of people, but freaking Sinbad, man, he's just a miser who like cranked up the tax rate to like 50%, man. And I don't really want to be in his guild anymore because I'm not getting as much money.
So
I agree with you. And I think that if you could delineate let's say XYZ rank, this person's a sergeant within the guild. There could even be, let's say, a certain percentage based on the rank within the guild. But then when you look at who can actually moderate and do that, aside from the guild leader, there could potentially be, let's say, like a financial keeper for the guild. That person would have the ability to set and moderate those perms, but it's a slippery slope. You would definitely I think you would want to set hard-coded limits, because anything over 50%, I'm not staying in your guild. I'm gone. Sorry.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
to kind of touch on that, actually, they've already mentioned that there'll be taxes in the nodes you live in. So do you want to have a double tax? Do you want to have basically being a guild, be taxed for everything you're doing in the guild, and then be taxed for being in that node? That might be too much. It might be stifling. So you have to be very wary of that as a guild, as an economy. Otherwise, you have people leave to lower taxed areas.
Agreed.
All I was thinking of in my head when you said that, do you want to be taxed again? I'm like, America. No.
Double taxes.
Double taxes. Double taxes. Good.
Actually, one of the things I was thinking about with that, and if it's okay if I step in here, but with this game, it's going to be very merchant-based, right? There's a lot of things to do with creators, crafters, people that are basically creating goods in your system. A lot of that's going to be doing with trade. What if you just tax any trade that's going out of your guild's merchants, like basically out of your bazaar of your guild? You could do a 10% tax on anything that's sold, almost like a sales tax. And that way you can fund your guild that way, rather than having to stifle what the individual makes on their drops of like monsters and stuff. You can fund it via what you're selling, and that helps you then push their sales. So you can help them earn more money because you can advertise for them.
Agreed.
I think that one of the big things that's going to happen is, and this is another control thing, is that each guild should have even a timing window for taxable things within their organization. So like, for example, if we have a call to war, I want to put a 7-day high tax value so we can fund the new event. Or if we're having a motion to try to push to the next level of civilization, instead of having to go and collect the various different things from the members that want to help, if we all agree on, hey, yeah, we're just going to dump everything into the guild, I'll just put a 7-day window, 100% tax rate, just so everyone's able to put all that effort without having to deal with someone's role being a tax collector. That's annoying. Like, so I'd rather just have it be something I can change, put a timing window on, have certain periods of, let's say during raids, if everyone's potions are paid for during raids, the timing window of raids is all tax. No one takes any money from it, but your repairs, the potions, etc. are covered. All those kind of controls should be something we should be able to do internally with finances, in my opinion. So,
absolutely. And I agree with you on that. With the taxation rate, I should be able to do 100% taxation if I really want. That's up to me. but that's the onus on the person. That's the burden of any government, right? Like the ability to go, we need money. How do we get it? Well, we tax the people. Well, how far can we tax them before we break their backs and they say, screw you, we're going somewhere else? That type of, I don't want the system to limit me in that case. If I want to be 100%, fine. But that doesn't mean anyone's going to want to stay around. You know what I mean? Like, that could be more detrimental. But if there is that high level of, we'll say, quote unquote, national spirit, if you will. Like, we know that, you know, Belewyn's guild is out for our necks, right? She's out to kill us. So she's like, I'm declaring war on you, like, the next chance I get. So we're like, guys, we need money quick to help raise funds for defense. Yeah, I'm booting it up. It's going all the way up, whatever the case may be. And those people, you know, hopefully, not too many defect to her because she's awesome, but that's the goal, is that, you know, that they will be willing to put forth the extra effort to protect their homes. Sinbad, before we wrap this up, what was your last thing?
Yeah, so, you know, the fact is that this game is going to be very much guild versus guild, alliance versus alliance. And in the caravan system, if you defeat that caravan, you're going to get a percentage of that loot that's dropped, right? Mm-hmm. What happens if you defeat another guild? Can you get a percentage of what's in their guild bank? You know, basically making it a very meaningful war. You know, that you have something to lose then. And if you have something to gain if you win. So you might have an incentive at that point beyond just resources in that area to go and attack a larger guild or to go and attack a larger alliance.
That's actually really fascinating. I like that idea, you know. Man, that would really, really suck and really would make me hate Belewyn for killing me. So sorry, I had to pull that in. All right, guys, that kind of brings us to the end of this episode. We still got a lot to talk about, so I'm probably going to bring some of these guys back on in a future episode from the Ashes. I want to thank everyone for showing up. First off, Belewyn, thank you so much for showing up. And what would you like to say to people? Where can they find you? Anything you want to do? This is your time for plugs.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's actually quite easy to find me. You're going to see me all over the Discord, all over the forums for the official Ashes of Creation, so I don't think I really need to expand any further than that. So I'm pretty easy to track down. I'm always active, and I'm looking forward to continuing in this community with everyone.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, it was a real pleasure having you on this episode, and hopefully we'll get you back here really soon in order to continue this conversation, and hopefully in future episodes as well, if I didn't scare you too much.
Oh, definitely not.
See, I'm a pretty nice guy. I don't bite unless asked. Maybe. I don't know. Whatever.
Oh, gosh.
Whatever. I'm just saying. Anyway, Sinbad, how about you?
All right, well, I'm one of the leaders of Seven Kingdoms. We're an AOC exclusive guild. We're PvX, RP, and consisting of hardcore and semi-hardcore members. We already have 100 members at this point. We're continuing to grow every day. So come join us. You'll find a home to thrive in. You know, we really strive to be the best, so we're going to do our best to help you out while you're here as well. We're going to put a link here, probably on the YouTube channel, and also we'll have us on our Discord as well, so you guys can find us right on Discord, just Seven Kingdoms.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, just check out I'll have links for all these guys. If anything that they're going to give me for links, I'll try to condense it. And it'll be in the show notes for both the YouTube as well as if you're listening to this on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, anywhere you listen to your podcast. Just open the show note description. You'll see links there for all this stuff. And finally, Telchar, how about you, sir? Where can people find you?
Also, I'm the guild master of Sons of the Seven. We're a PvX and mercantilism as well as political focused guild. We're trying to build a employee-owned company, you could say, within the game that is focusing on being, high-end crafting as well as economic power. And we have a lot of players that are focused on that kind of activity from other games such as EVE Online, Dark Age of Camelot, etc., going back in time. And one of the things we're trying to do is just recruit players that have a very, capitalism-focused mind. So if that's something that you're interested in, we are definitely interested in talking to you. And the guild website will probably be linked in the channel info as well. And if y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty iconic in the community already. I'm the only Telchar this far, so hopefully y'all can find me on the Ashes Discord. And if you need to direct message me, I'm always available to chat. So.
Yep, I agree. Both these guys are really cool guys. I've talked to them quite a bit, actually, over the past few weeks. Telchar was actually, I think, Telchar, you were one of the very first people to actually message me from the community, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, well, after I did, one of the first interviews we had, you were one of the very first people to actually send me a message and, say, hey,
cool.
How you doing? So that was really cool. So I've had Telchar in my back pocket as a potential host for a while, just trying to get him to bring him on here, and this was a fun time to have him on. So thank you so much, guys.
No problem.
So obviously, Dungeon Crawler Network. Follow us for From the Ashes of Creation podcast for our network, and as well for the community. As you can see, we try to do a lot of community stuff, try to get more than just our voices out there, because that's what we want. We love to be able to talk about the games that we love to play. And, I mean, we have high hopes for Ashes of Creation. So check us out, DungeonCrawlerNetwork.com. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, pretty much anywhere that you can find your podcast. Any RSS feed readers, that's where you can do it. YouTube.com/DungeonCrawlerNetwork. Oh, I mean, you can just find us anywhere. Facebook, all those areas are just Dungeon Crawler Network. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you listening, and we hope to see you in Ashes of Creation. See you later, everybody.
See ya.
Yeah.